Welcome again to Edu Skills OET Made Easy. Our mission is to make you fall in love with OET. If you're watching this on YouTube, kindly consider subscribing the channel. Give us a thumbs up if you like our work, and share to your contacts so that we reach out to maximum number of OET aspirants, especially those who are financially struggling to crack OET. Writing step by step, as I said, we have 21 steps to go. Today we'll be looking into how to form complex sentences. What you have to do, as you complete this session, what you are supposed to go to your simple sentences that you have framed from the case notes and try to transform them into compound sentences as the first step. May not be all the case notes, not required. As and when required, you can make compound sentences. After that, you can try to combine one simple sentence and a complex sentence or compound sentence into a complex sentence, or two compound sentences into a complex sentence as required. Now, complex sentence, dependent clause, comma, independent clause. I said there are two clauses in a complex sentence. There is a dependent clause, which means, as it says, as the name sounds, it has to depend on an independent clause to make sense. Dependent clause itself will not have a meaning. Now, this comma was an issue and a lot of discussions were going on. Once I remember, I taught them an introductory paragraph. Then they went to some other institute. They wrote with comma and they said there should not be comma. And I'll be explaining there can be comma, there cannot be comma. And if where you need comma, if you omit comma, you'll be penalized. Where you require comma, if you put comma, you'll be penalized in the complex sentence itself. You should be very thorough with that. So independent clause and without comma, you can write dependent clause. This means if you write dependent clause first, you must mark a comma, then write the independent clause. If you have attended, our Sridhar and all people here from Bangalore in my offline session, maybe our Soumyaji was made the comma. Okay, then Sunita was the independent clause, someone else was the dependent clause. So we have demonstrated it. That's very important because this is going to be, as regards your grammar, this is going to be penalized if you make a mistake here. So if you are writing the independent clause first, that doesn't require a support. So no comma is required. After independent clause, you can write dependent clause. I'll explain it with the examples. See, now you write at the end of the letter. If you have any further queries, comma, because this is a dependent clause. If you have any further queries, doesn't make sense by itself. So you have to mark a comma before you write the independent clause. Please do not hesitate to contact me. Please do not hesitate to contact me is a complete sentence. Their subject is understood. You please do not hesitate to contact me. You can be put in brackets. You don't write it. That's not required, but it is understood. So you have a subject, a verb, and complex. So this is dependent clause. Then you have comma. Then you have independent clause. So just remember, if DC, if there is dependent clause first, you have to have comma. You must put comma. If it is independent, IC, no comma. No IC, only DC. After independent clause, no comma. If you have any further queries, comma, please do not hesitate to contact me. Now, which clause first, independent or dependent clause? So the answer is, if the independent clause comes first, don't use comma. Do not hesitate to contact me if you require further information. The same sentence, we have put the order in a different way. Earlier it was, we started with if clause. Now we have, do not hesitate to contact me if you require further information. So no comma here, because do not hesitate to contact me in itself is a sentence. The subject, I said, understood. You do not hesitate to contact me. So no comma there. Independent clause, do not hesitate to contact me. You is understood there. You don't write. Yeah. When you stand in the middle of the stage, a general example, dependent clause, comma, you can talk to everybody. You have the independent clause at the end. Second part is the independent clause. So you need a comma because you started with when you stand in the middle of the stage, then that itself doesn't make proper sense, perfect sense. That's why it is known as dependent clause. When you stand in the middle of the stage, you can talk to everybody. After the middle of stage, there is a comma because dependent clause first. Now you see, you can talk to everybody. No full stop here. Okay, that's a mistake. See, we are putting the other way about the order. Independent clause first. You can talk to everybody when you stand in the middle of the stage. Okay, independent clause first, then dependent clause. Then in between, there is no comma box. When you stand in the middle of the stage, that is the other one. Okay, this is the other order. One independent clause, one dependent clause. I am again stressing, giving some more examples. One complex sentence means one independent clause, another independent clause with comma or without comma. Independent clause contains a verb and is a sentence by itself. Which clause first? As I said, independent clause comes first. Don't use comma. If the dependent clause comes first, use comma. Now you see one example, which clause comes first. Treatment will begin after a full diagnosis is made. Treatment will begin is independent clause. Subject plus verb is a complete sentence. Treatment will begin. So if since treatment will begin is the first part of the sentence, you need not put a comma. But then if you start with after a full diagnosis is made, comma, the treatment will begin. Treatment will begin after a full diagnosis. So there are one independent clause, one dependent clause. We have started with independent clause. So there is no comma required. After a full diagnosis, see the other way, it is written in a different way. After a full diagnosis, that is dependent clause first. So we have put a comma here. Treatment will begin. So if you start with the dependent clause, you have to put a comma. Usually you use a complex sentence when you write your introductory paragraph as well as your last request. Do not hesitate to contact me. So beginning should create a good impression. So make sure that when you write a complex sentence in the introductory paragraph, if at all you are writing, make sure this C is followed. And one more example, the patient's symptoms aggravated due to non-compliance with medication. The patient's symptoms aggravated due to non-compliance with medication. Independent clause first. The patient's symptoms aggravated. That itself is a sentence, full sentence. So it is an independent clause. That's why we have not put a comma after that, after the independent clause. So dependent clause is due to non-compliance with medication. So if you are writing the dependent clause first, you have to use the comma. For example, here you see same sentence written in a different order. Due to non-compliance with the medication is dependent clause. So comma, the patient's symptoms aggravated, which is an independent clause. Okay, that's it. So we have seen a couple of examples, good many of them. And what you have to do is you need to practice for your competency.